B-Months, real quick, man. Obviously, the awards have been, put out now in college football, so forth and so on. What's your, being in media and being around media, what's your thought on it being Travis Hunter as opposed to, Genty?
Oh, man, I haven't really thought about it that way.
Well, let me throw this part out to you too, real quick.
Sure.
And here's an addition as to why the question still stands, but the addition to that question ultimately comes down to me is this, B-Months. You've got to look at what those numbers look like for when Reggie Bush won it in 2005, right?
Mm-hmm.
Numbers blows his out the water, but yet he was the guy. Would you say this is attributed to the transition on top of the answer? Is this attributed towards the transition into more of a quarterback dominated sport, wide receiver dominated sport, as different than the running back position at this point? Would you say probably?
I think that plays a lot into it. Plus the team that Reggie Bush, played on with Leinart and the others, was drastically better than the Boise State team. That's not throwing any shade their way. Genty, in my opinion, should have won the Heisman. Is Travis Hunter electrifying? Does he do amazing things on the football field? Absolutely, positively, yes. But here's like the next thing that I'll say that probably maybe you guys will agree with and maybe you won't. I wouldn't even have given the Blitnikoff to Hunter. I would not have even given the Blitnikoff. The kid from San Jose State should have won that. And I can't even think of what his name is right now off the top of my head. Yes, his stats, again, freaky. Is that have anything to do, like what you said, Strick, going back to where the evolution of the football game is at and how much value is put on that quarterback position? I'm not 100% sure. Clearly that position is highly regarded, and I think it's easy to kind of lose some of those things. With Hunter, you'd have to overlook both sides of the football. I think that's what made it so disruptive for him to overlook him in that regard. But at the same time, I just don't think you can look past like what you said, like those comparative kind of scenarios when it comes like, well, this was a season that this person had, and this is a season that this person had, and this is when they won it and they didn't win it. And I think that, you've had those obvious opportunities for those guys to go out and prove themselves. I would go back, if everybody wants to go back and start talking about, well, he didn't play against didn't play his best against the best competition. How did Hunter play against Nebraska? He didn't play very well. And there was a run there that Dowdell was, breaking to the end zone. Mm-hmm. Hunter got out of the way. Mm-hmm. He didn't want anything to do with that. So I don't know. I'm a little bit torn. I think he's a great player. I'm not going to lose too much sleep over it. But honestly, when you saw him pick up the Blitnikoff, it was almost like, okay, this is which way this thing is going right now. And that's the part maybe to me that if he hadn't gotten that, if people were paying closer attention, like what you were saying, Strick, he probably doesn't end up getting the Heisman either.
Brian, we're going to try this for a transition. Could Nebraska get its own Ashton Genty out of the transfer portal in one-time Nebraska football at Target, Kawan Lacey?
Oh, well done. It's possible. Lacey's a special talent. We talked about him all year last year. He's a 10-4, 100 guy. Just his stats last year at Missouri are really hard to understand. And he played 5 games. He lost his red shirt. And in like that red shirt game, or the game where he burned his red shirt, I think he had 5 carries. And then didn't see the field after that. There's just between Lacey and between, Nwerny, there's some really difficult things to kind of understand about those two highly prized, highly valued 2025 targets that Missouri brought in. That it kind of tells me anyway about that Missouri had a bigger bag to give to somebody that was joining the team versus somebody that they were trying to maintain, like on roster management. And that part, to me at least, that's what it says. But could Nebraska do it? Yes. I like what Lacey does because he doesn't sit in a single room. He's in the running backs room. He's in the wide receiver room. He's going to be in your special teams room. So he does so many different things for an offense or for a team in general that I think he could be an asset. I think Nebraska's room looks pretty good. I like both freshman running backs. I like who they return. If Emmett Johnson had decided to go ahead and leave, Nebraska probably would have had a great opportunity right here to make a run at Q1. But I'm wondering right now if we're, after he had kind of did what he did in Nebraska, going down to the month of November before he decided to dip out and go do his thing with Missouri. I'm wondering if he didn't burn a bridge, and obviously, Garrett McGuire, who was kind of that lead recruiter for him too, being down there in that Dallas area, because that's where Garrett's from, Cedar Hill area. It just maybe wouldn't have been a good fit anymore anyway.
Fair enough, but you mentioned Nebraska does get Williams-Nwaneri in the fold, 5-star plus. That's a big one. But it continued the trend of Kansas City, Brian. A lot of flips from Nebraska, some more recruiting going on. And then officially today, this morning, we get the news Nebraska will be playing down in Arrowhead instead of this game taking place at Lucas Oil Stadium in Indianapolis. Just how much of a benefit is it for Nebraska to get that game moved from Indy to Kansas City? And does that have anything to do with the Huskers' recent push down into the KC Metro again?
Well, I think it does two things. I think it benefits Cincinnati, first of all. That's you're going to get down a little bit closer to, the conference you're playing in, some areas that you want to kind of recruit in as well. But for Nebraska, this is heaven sent. You're bringing Jamar Mosey back home, number one. And, you're giving him an opportunity to tell the guys, hey, come on out and check us out. And I think that's how that, it's really kind of difficult to kind of understand how the visitor stuff will work on a neutral site. But I try to remember how it works with the Cotton Bowl in Oklahoma and Texas every single year. But at the very minimum, they can go ahead and get their own ticket and go sit down and watch the game, in the stands. So I think it's also a huge plus to, play in a state where you don't have a team basically from the Big Ten footprint there. So if you want to keep expanding those relationships and the pipeline in the KC area, this is enormous. And like you said, everybody out of the KC area they got this year, including the portal transfer, they were all flips. And I think Nebraska sits really well with a number of 2026 guys from KC, from Missouri in general, that this could be a really huge boost and nice thing to kind of, get things going again around. Because I think right now, they're losing a little bit of steam kind of going into the spring, And I think 2027 guys, this would be a nice way to kind of pick it back up again a little bit with some of those guys, because it was so incredibly important to kind of get those guys on campus earlier this year. So yeah, it's a big thing for Nebraska and a big thing for what they're trying to accomplish right now.
And the game's on a Thursday instead of a Saturday. What does that do for Nebraska in terms of eyeballs, whether it's on the TV or potentially in person, that this game is a weekday game? It's a Thursday, helping kick off the college football season instead of being, on a traditional college football Saturday.
Yeah, I get it. I still happen to find my way into my comfortable little rocking chair on Thursday nights to watch the game on Amazon. So I think it's doable. I think it does stay out of the way somewhat of high school competition. There might be a couple guys, that start up that early anyway. That's probably like week 0, that they would probably be firing up. It'll be interesting to see how that kind of works out. But it's one of those things. I think it's going to work out to where it's like the only thing that's kind of on that night or at that time, and it may actually help drive up a lot of viewership, honestly, when it comes to, hey, college football is back, and guess what? We got Nebraska versus Cincinnati, and that's a good one.
It does still scare me, Brian. I've still got some Nebraska scar tissue about the Huskers being that primetime game, the only team in the window. To me, it would be a good sign for the program that it's moving in the right direction. Obviously win the game, right? Start a season opener off with a win. But how many times have we seen Nebraska not take advantage of these moments? I think that's really just the way of the world, where Nebraska can't bank on being the biggest Saturday draw anymore. Sure, they'll get some big noon slots or maybe a CBS slot here or there. But I think as much as Husker fans might hem and haw about not loving the Thursday or the Friday game to start the year, this might be Nebraska's best opportunity to get some of these important eyeballs and visitors.
No, that's a great point. I mean, obviously they don't have another Colorado on the schedule next year.
Right.
So it's really one of those things where you're trying to still get the word out about what Matt Rule is doing, and here's Dylan Raiola, and here's Emmett Johnson, and we're going to roll out all these these cool freshmen on the defensive side of the football, Christian Jones and Dawson Merritt. You want people to see that. You want people to see kids from the Kansas City area being successful on the field for Nebraska. So you want Norney to be on the field. You want Mosey to be on the field. You want those things to happen so the broadcasters can bring it out. I mean, that's where things really become relevant at that point. I think Nebraska, though, to your point, I think that there's very limited opportunities this year. You need to take what you can get. I think that this is going to surprise some people. I mean, myself personally, guess what? I'm already talking about the guys going up there and hitting the game, because I don't have to cover necessarily recruiting as a part of it, so I can go up there and check it out. It's kind of playing with house money, so to speak.
Fair enough. The other thing I want to hit with you, Bryan, is something Strick and I brought up at the end of last week. We saw a letter written by a Michigan football walk-on to Judge Claudia Wilkin, who's presiding over the House versus NCAA case. And this walk-on was essentially asking Judge Wilkin to grant a grace period or just a period of time for college football rosters to get down from wherever they are to the 105 that we all seem to think is coming. As you look at recruiting, how coaching staffs and recruiting staffs are operating in college football right now, do you think that those people and even the players, would they rather just rip the Band-Aid off, go down from 125, 130, 150 down to 105 this year and say this is the new normal, get used to it? Or would it be better for coaches, for recruiting staffs, and for players to have a grace period, to have 2 or 3 years to get down from your current roster size to the 105 that's proposed?
In my opinion, it's the latter. You're putting all the pain recruiting-wise into a single class, right? Mm-hmm. You are going to go ahead and, just like in 2020, you're really going to limit the numbers of players or of kids out of high school that are going to get an opportunity to go on and play college football at all. And I think there's also another kind of a significant event happening here too. So that's one way. That's going in. Let's talk about the laterals, the portal guys. So now if you have 40 kids, by 125 programs, so what does that come out to be, like?
A lot. I didn't do math, Bryan.
5,000 players. Yeah, it's like 5,000 players, I guess. If you have that many players that are being cut essentially across Division I football, yeah, you're probably going to go ahead and help out some SCS programs and some D2 programs. Mm-hmm. But these guys are obviously, they're staggering themselves into the portal. Number one. Number two, there's going to be kind of two windows. You get before the holidays, after the holidays, up to the end of the semester, and you're going to have basically this other cut coming at the end of spring. Mm-hmm. Where you're going to do it again, and everybody's working now off of the 105. So it's tit for tat, right? If you want to bring one in, one's got to go. So there's no kind of area, no fluff that anybody has described yet about practice squads, or we're going to float an extra 15 players here, and you have to designate them as basically being ineligible or something like that to play. There still seems to be some real fine lines here that have not been drawn up, and I kind of halfway agree. I think his name was John Weidenbach. Mm-hmm. I kind of halfway agree with him. I mean, I think there's a lot of pressure on recruiting right now, and I think there's even more pressure on the portal when it comes to some of these guys that are getting cut, that have to go find a new place to play, that are not going to find a home because numbers are just simply going to keep them out of it.
As you look back 3.5, 4 years later, what was maybe the bigger impact of how COVID impacted recruiting? Was it the reduction of spots in the smaller classes, or was it the additional year of eligibility that everyone got across the board?
It was the eligibility year for sure. I mean, everything was out of skew. I mean, and then you had options. You had options for, senior versus super senior and kind of how that stuff was going to kind of work. And, when you're in the Big Ten conference, where basically your scholarship is kind of quote unquote guaranteed, right? Like that's the conference thing. It's, it gets really tough because maybe you got some guys that are hanging around on your third string that are never going to be a part of your team, never going to be of any value, never going to be able to kind of step up and be productive. And there's nothing you can do about it. And, oh, by the way, they got a sixth year coming after that if they decide to go ahead and stick around for it and get their masters or finish up whatever. I mean, yeah, I think it was the extra year for sure.
That's Bryan Munson of Husker Online with us. Bryan, tell people where they can find your work, whether it's on Twitter or on Husker Online. What's the best way to get to it?
Yeah, go ahead and check me out on Twitter. It's going to be at Bryan Munson. It's BryanMunson and _. And then get on over to Husker Online. We've got some of the best stuff going on right now. All the portal transfer recruiting that's going on. There are a ton of guys right now, including a quarterback transfer that's on campus right now from Purdue, and a lot of stuff coming down the rest of this week. So looking forward to continuing to bring you guys that news.
We will look forward to hearing that news from you, our trusted source here on the block, Bryan Munson. As always, B. Munson, appreciate your time. Have a good rest of your week, man.
Hey, happy holidays to you guys. We'll see you.
All right.
Same to you.